Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, coming here with another great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. We, of course, have all the best guests on the ChrisVossShow.com, and today's going to be a dual podcast show. We're going to have the Chris Voss Show podcast, of course, hosting the show, and it will also be found on our book author podcast. So you can go to bookauthorpodcast.com, and you can see that. You can decide which podcast you want to subscribe to at any times. And of course, you can go to the Chris Voss Podcast Network.com and subscribe to all the different shows. I think there's 6 or 7 of them over there. But if you want to listen to 100% book author interviews, you can do that on the bookauthorpodcast.com, or you can just see everything we have on the ChrisVossShow.com podcast as well. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Chris Voss. If you're into gaming, you can also go to our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Chris Voss. We're giving away some really cool game codes and different things over there, so you can see some of that stuff as well. Today's guest is Chris Clews. Oh my gosh. He's a marketing executive, speaker, and an author of the book, What 80s Pop Culture Teaches Us About Today's Workplace. It's the first in a series that finds the lessons from the 1980s movies for the workplace today. And he even has a second one due late in the spring that he's coming out with, another book. He's, along with being an author, he's a speaker, frequent business, and 80s podcast guest. Chris is currently the head of marketing for DHL Resilience 360, and he resides in Deerfield Beach, Florida. We don't hold the Florida against him. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, Chris.
I kid all my Florida friends. You guys have I don't know what's going on down there, man, but there's something in you guys' water.
We have Florida man down here. That's what they always say. Florida man's in the news all the time.
Oh yeah, you guys just had a mayor get arrested down there for being a doctor in his own house or something, because they pulled his license and they just did a big raid on him.
Yeah. And then another one just a couple weeks ago for licking people's faces or something.
Around here, that's what I call Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you. Let's get to know Chris a little bit better. I mean, you've done a few things. You've been a stand-up comic. I understand your past history.
Yeah, I do stand-up comedy for fun here and there. I just go up on stages once in a while. And the first time I did it, I actually decided just to go straight to the improv for an open mic. So typically when I go do something, I go it's hard. I go all in. I go hard, and I don't go gradual. So
sounds like your first marriage. So you did the improv, the comedy improv on Sunset Boulevard there, I think.
In West Palm Beach, Florida.
Oh, West Palm Beach, Florida. They have them all over the place.
Yeah.
One of my friends used to babysit. What's his name? The kid from the not from the improv, but from the Comedy Store. That's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, it's quite challenging to do improv, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, I was lucky. I do open mics where you can prepare your material for about 5 minutes, and then you get up there and do your thing. And I'll tell you, the first time you do it, it's pretty terrifying. Looking out over this crowd and knowing that you don't know, 95% of the people have no idea who you are, and you have to try to make them laugh at your jokes. And you can feel your heart coming through your chest. You're pretty sure everybody else can see it too. So
yeah. I remember one time I was speaking at an event back east somewhere, and they had the front row. They didn't tell me, but the whole front row, the speaking folks were a group of people who were deaf, and I was telling jokes, and like most of the room was laughing, but the front row I couldn't get the laugh, and it really started driving me crazy. I started losing it in my speech, because I'm like, why? And they're just looking at me like, who's this fucking guy? And it just threw my whole speech off, because I didn't know those guys were like the deaf crew up front. And I'm like telling them jokes. I'm trying to, interact with them a little bit. And I'm just, dying on stage with this front row thing. And, it becomes one of those things where as a comedian, you just start, you focus in on the guy who's not laughing, because you're like, what do I got to do to get this guy to laugh? And I came off stage just ready to quit ever speaking again. And I'm like, what the fuck is with the front row? And they're just like, yeah, they're all deaf. They can't hear you, which is probably good anyway. So I'm not that funny.
I encourage anybody who, if you have a fear of speaking, if you have a fear of getting up in front of people, putting together 5 minutes of comedy material, go up on an improv stage or go up on a stage at any comedy, your local comedy club, do that 5 minutes, and I can assure you, you will never have a problem getting in front of anybody at work ever again for meetings, presentations. It's the best thing you do.
And if you do a comedy stand-up tryout in LA, you're literally there. I think you pay like $15 for 5 minutes or something, and you probably have to buy some drinks or something too. But everybody in the room is there doing the same thing you are, trying to try out. So they don't even want you to succeed. They're just not even gonna laugh. They're just like, fuck this guy. You're basically sitting in a room trying to make a bunch of people that just want to see you fail, and that also paid $15 for 5 minutes. They're just like, get the fuck off the stage. So it's a brutal business, writing jokes and they're trying to be funny or being funny. And I think some people, they get out and you learn you're not as funny as you do. But yeah, it's definitely a trial by fire when it comes down to it, especially improv. So you did a little bit of that. You grew up, of course, in the 80s, which is where you wrote this book out of the experience and knowledge, I guess, that you gained from going through one of the greatest periods of music and pop culture probably ever. I'm clearly biased with my age, obviously. And you're a huge sports fan. You've done some NCAA basketball stuff, PGA stuff.
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough with my marketing career to do some pretty cool sports sponsorships. NCAA basketball, Major League Baseball, PGA, and my favorite was the UFC. Sponsored a bunch of UFC fighters about 5 or 6 years ago, which was just pretty awesome. That was a really that was a lot of fun, that experience. And so yeah.
Now you also did some. This is kind of interesting. That's in your bio. You did some stint as a bellman at several hotels on the Disney property and did security for celebrities at Planet Hollywood back in the day.
Back in the day.
Good, interesting Disney celebrity celebrity stories. Anything salacious?
Yeah, there's some interesting. You see some interesting things for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Things. But working at Disney was pretty cool. I mean, it's a great experience if you're in your 20s and you're out of college and you want to learn about true customer service. It's a great place to learn.
Yeah. Did you ever get into any arguments with Mickey Mouse or anything like that? You ever?
No, goofed once, but that was it.
Yeah. It'd be funny. I'd go to work at Disney and then I'd find out that the guy who's playing Mickey Mouse is like an asshole, and like he has some sort of beef with me that I don't know what the beef would be, and then we just have to, I'd just be like, I'd hate Mickey Mouse after that, and just ruin my whole childhood. That's probably the way.
Yeah, I was lucky. I didn't have to be around those guys too much, so I think but I did. The experience was pretty cool, I will say.
I mean, seriously, if you think about it, you got to wear a goddamn costume all day long in 70-degree heat in California. Are you really that happy? I mean, I'd be drinking on the inside of the costume. That's what I'd be doing. I'd be like, well, what's that Santa movie with what's his face? I'd be that guy with the costume. I'd be fired from Disney like in 5 minutes. They'd just be like, hey man, this guy's got to go. Plus I'd be a really fat fucking Mickey Mouse. So that would probably be inappropriate in some way.
You'd be too tall, man. Trust me. It's like, yeah, I'll tell you, it's a pretty cool place to kind of, I mean, I guess cut your teeth. And when I moved to Orlando, I actually just literally after college, I packed up my car and a couple $100 and drove. And it was 1993. So we had no cell phones. There was no way to communicate with anybody on the way down except stopping at a payphone.
Wow. Yeah, I remember those days.
South Carolina, I'm here, I'm there. And ended up in Orlando and was lucky enough to land a job at Disney to keep myself going, because before that, I was literally eating pasta without the sauce. I could afford the pasta or the sauce, and the pasta was more filling. So that's what I
remember those days. Sometimes you'd just eat the uncooked top ramen just so you'd have some solid food for a change instead of just top ramen. You sprinkle that seasoning package on there because it's like, that's seasoning right there. So let's get to your book. What 80s pop culture teaches us about today's workplace? So what the hell is this book about? Like, what is going on with this? Is it Ferris Bueller's Day Off where I just need to call in sick for the day? for the workplace?
Yeah, well, that's one lesson actually. Work-life balance. If
So let's talk about the book.
What's that?
Well, let's talk about the book. That you can get this on Amazon, I imagine, in a few different places. So you basically take the lessons from the 80s, different things from the pop culture, and how we can apply it to the workplace.
So you can buy the book on Amazon, and actually have a website as well, chrisclews.com, CLEWS. Same on Facebook and LinkedIn, and then also on Twitter. I was actually lucky enough, surprisingly, about 8 months ago, I went for my Twitter handle, and @80s Pop Culture was available. So it's pretty easy. It ties right back to the book.
Seriously? That was available?
I couldn't believe it. It was a sign. It was a sign, I think. So I have @80s Pop Culture as my Twitter handle. And yeah, the book's available on Amazon, and I'm actually about close to halfway through the second book. And then that one's going to have larger distribution. So
what's the name of the second book? Do you have a name for it yet? Is it going to be the 90s pulp culture?
No, actually, I'm going to put my flag on top of the 80s mountain. And
are you? You're going down with the 80s. They're just going to ride that fucking train all the way. Good for you.
And I've got so there'll be what 80s pop culture teaches us about today's workplace. And the first one is mixtape number 1, mixtape number 2, mixtape number 3, because we all used to make mixtapes in the 80s. So, and each one of them will take 10 movies from the 80s and find the business lessons in them.
That's awesome, man. I've seen the videos of you where you get up and you talk about and you're speaking about what you guys learned and lessons learned. Give us some examples of some of the lessons you use in your book. Yeah,
excellent. So I'll give you one right off the bat that I think is a really important one for today's workplace, and that's from the Goonies. So if you remember the Goonies, they were just a ragtag bunch of kids, and two of the characters in particular really stuck with me. And it was Chunk and Sloth. And both of them phenomenal characters. Actually, Chunk now is an entertainment lawyer out in LA, and he's done fantastic. He's doing fantastic on that side of the business. Sloth was played by Ted Matuzak, who was an Oakland Raider back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so they taught us about inclusion, and they taught us a really important lesson about inclusion in the workplace. If you remember back in the movie, Chunk was thrown down in the basement by the Fratelli family, right? And Sloth was chained up down there. He was one of their brothers, but he was chained up because of the way he looked, that he had this cone-shaped head and these ears that wiggled and eyes that were offset and missing some teeth. He was a strange-looking guy.
My parents the same with me. I get it.
Yeah. And you might like Baby Ruth too, right?
You didn't have to agree with me, but we'll get, you know.
He gets down there, and of course, you know, Sloth is chained up, and eventually when he gets unchained, he picks up Chunk, and Chunk says, "Man, you smell like Phys Ed." And so not only is Sloth awkward looking, but he smells like Phys Ed. And Chunk looks past all of this. All he wants to do is be his friend. That's all he cares about. Wants to be his friend, bring him into the group, include him, the whole idea of inclusion, include him into the group. And in return, what did they get? They found out that Sloth's greatest asset was his loyalty. And at the end of the movie, he saves their lives. He puts himself in front of his family and saves their lives over his family and shows his loyalty to them. And so there's a really important lesson in there for the workplace.
There is. Fuck family. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people do that in the workplace too, man. It's meant to.
Well, that's true too. I mean, I've had a few friends who've ignored their family and ended up in messy divorces because they work too much. But you know, it's either that, you got to pay the bills, whatever. You can't make everyone happy. But I've had personal relationships where you know, I've worked too much and let them slide. Sometimes there were business relationships where we focused so much on the business that the friendship fell away, and then the partnership fell away in the business. So those, I don't know, some different ways that happens.
Well, no, it's a good segue into when you mentioned Ferris Bueller earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Ferris Bueller taught us about work-life balance, but in a couple of interesting contexts. And I'll kind of set up the story about why I came up with that idea of Ferris Bueller and work-life balance. When I'm talking about being at work at extended hours, this is going back probably 1998, 99. And I was working for an interactive ad agency. So, you know, I've been in digital marketing for a while. In 1998, we were getting 25% click-through rates on our banners because people were just fascinated by, wait a minute, I click this and then I go to another website. This is incredible. They didn't care about what the website was. They were just fascinated by this animation. And I was working for a client at the agency. My mom had come down to see me. I hadn't seen her in a couple of years. I moved to Florida and I was just busy doing things. And she came down on a Friday. I was supposed to meet her at a restaurant at 8 o'clock. This is in the book. And I didn't get there till after 10 because I was working on a project for a client who, by the way, a year later, nothing really mattered anyway. The site was out of business. The company was out of business. And, you know, I missed this opportunity with my mom, and I left her at the restaurant for several hours by herself.
Well, you're going to hell, man.
My mom was one of the greatest people you could ever meet. I mean, just a gentle soul and very patient. And so thankful for me. But out of that, you know, I learned a valuable lesson about what's important. And Ferris teaches us that in a little bit of a different way. But what he does, he goes one step further. And what he teaches us is, think about when you're in your workplace, your place of business. You always have a Cameron. There's always a Cameron Fry at your business. Somebody who's typically always unhappy. They're just, things aren't going well in their life. They tend to be negative, not in a way that pushes people away necessarily.
I told you not to talk about me. I'm just kidding.
Is that you?
No, I'm just.
So that doesn't seem like you. So Cameron Fry. Everybody has a Cameron Fry at work. And so Ferris taught us not only about work-life balance, but that it's important that sometimes, you know, you feel good about your life, things are going well for you, to make sure that if you take that day off, that you take your Cameron, your work Cameron with you. Because they need, you know, force them like he did. Force them to come with you. Don't let them sit there and say, you know, when Cameron was in Egypt's land, let my Cameron go.
Let my Cameron go.
To come with you on that day off and spend some time away.
You know, my Tinder has that same sort of click-through rate, about 25%. Yeah. It's mostly women going, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? They just want to see, you know, how messed up this dude is. And then they screenshot me and send me to all their friends on Facebook and go, can you believe this asshole's on fucking Tinder? So there's that.
Your ghost you're on 25% as well?
Yeah. Yeah. But there's no follow click through. The sales funnel ends there. That's just pretty much what it is. But you know, whatever. At least I'm popular. So whatever that means, I don't know. So there's a lot of cool things we can learn. I think a lot of people that changed a lot of people's mindset. That movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and gave people kind of a perspective thing. Also, you know, I mean, one of the greatest scenes in the movie is when they leap the car, when the car goes off and it plays the Imperial Star Wars music. That's just such a great scene. That movie. It goes off. I mean, the 80s had some of the best times, some of the best movies, some of the best TVs. I mean, it was a really great creative age. And a lot of it came from, I think, the late 70s, and in a lot of creative studios, whether it was movies or music, or anything else, there still was this creative thing that was going on that wasn't quite the controlling part of corporate culture and manipulation. What's the word I'm looking for? The payola sort of stuff that came around with Mariah Carey. You know, back in those days, they would take music labels would take bands and they would let them make the music they wanted for the most part. And so they would make this music, and sometimes it would be good, sometimes it would be not really great. And then they'd be like, well, you know, we'll give you 3 or 4 albums to work out that band thing and that music thing, you know, and then, you know, they progressively get better. And then all of a sudden some band that, you know, had a bunch of shitty albums would all of a sudden have that hit album that would hit in the 80s. And you're just like, all right, you know, those 4 albums they did made, you know, everything better when it finally came out. And then, of course, I think it was the A&R men started showing up, and the corporate people started showing up, going, "Oh, we need to take this magic and try and control it," and started really killing the creationism, the creative juices of the 1980s. And then, you know, you got to the 90s, and everything went downhill after that. The Nirvana, excuse me, grunge. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. My millennials.
I have some ideas about that, by the way, about the whole creative thing in the 80s and how
I'd love to hear your take on it, because I just spewed out mine. I could be wrong.
Yeah. So I think there was a couple of things that happened in the 80s. We were moving towards independence in terms of people. People being able to be, as you know, Depeche Mode said, people are people, right? So people being able to be who they wanted to be. And it was the first time in the 80s where somebody could walk down the street with a purple mohawk. And sure, there were people that kind of looked twice, but a lot of people just walked right by him and said, you know, that's it. It's a purple mohawk, big deal. And that was the first time in the 80s that we experienced that. I think that independence and creative spirit, and everybody kind of starting to accept people for who they were. Yeah. And that drove a lot of the creativity, right?
Where in the 70s, everyone was just kind of like a freak and looked down upon because everyone lived in the 60s with that IBM sort of model where everyone wears a black suit and a black tie and a black hat and shows up to work and no one has any color or personality. And yeah, who was one of the big pop culture things that really changed the look and feel of all that? Madonna, and then Cyndi Lauper. Cyndi Lauper was huge at affecting pop culture during that thing, and really, you know, going color, Culture Club was all about color and personality. I think The Cure. I'm trying to think of some other bands, but yeah, it was really this great time of experimentation and try new things. And you know, there were some people in the older crowd that were like, you know, fucking kids. But for the most part, it was just a great time. There's wonderful things that were happening. Sound was getting better. There was a lot of individualism that came out of that. You saw the launch of the Walkman, the Sony Walkman. I remember being so proud of that. And for the first time, you were free of the radio, which if you grew up in my era, you literally sat by the radio and you called the DJ and said, "Play my favorite song." Sounds like a song that they issued nowadays. But
to Sally from John for
I would call the DJ like relentlessly. Like, it's amazing they didn't have call blocking back then, because they're like, look, we're not going to play Steely Dan Reelin' the Years yet. That comes up every, you know, top of every hour. Just calm down, buddy. You know? And but you had so much great stuff. I think disco was just rounding out at that time. You had you know, lots of great heavy metal music, Metallica. I mean, just so much great music came out of there. Great movies. I mean, they're still making, you know, reruns of all the great movies of the 80s. Star Wars, you know. It's kind of like every great creative thing kind of came out of that era.
Yeah, you know, I talk about that a little bit in the book as well. This idea that the 80s, the decade of the 80s, and the creative energy that was there, and why. And so what's really interesting is I was doing research for the book, and one of the things that I do in each chapter, before I get into the movie and the workplace lessons that it taught us, I set up the time frame. So I say if a movie came out in June of 1983, for example, I went back and I looked at what the top 40 music was, what the movies at the box office were, the television. And I talk a little bit about that, to kind of taking back to that time, or if you weren't around in that time, to kind of show you what it was like. And what I found that was really interesting, and it kind of proves the point we're talking about with this individualism, the top 40 was so diverse and so eclectic. I love the word plethora, so I like to throw it in anytime I can. There was just this plethora of music genres. And if you look at the top 40, even the top 10, you would have everything from like a Debbie Gibson right next to a Warrant, next to you know, Grandmaster Flash. I mean, you have this incredible mix of music. And then, let me just throw in like Kenny Rogers, who happened to be at the same time.
I think Kenny Rogers was one of the first country crossovers, wasn't he?
He was, yeah, he was actually.
Yeah. I remember my friends going, "You got to listen to this album, The Gambler." I'm like, "What is it? It's country. Fuck country." Yeah. But you know, I think I've always been a Kenny Rogers fan. He's a good guy.
That doesn't exist anymore. You know, the top 40, everything. I mean, I hate to sound old, but I mean, legitimately, everything does sound very much the same, and it's about that package. Find it that works, make a lot of money from it, and stick to it.
And then comedy. Yeah, a lot of great comedy that came out. The Comedy Store, Live at the Improv. I mean, what a great comedy era that the 80s were. You had all the great comedians. George Carlin, of course. George Carlin was around back in the 50s and 60s, but you had
Eddie Murphy. I saw Eddie Murphy Raw live.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy. You saw it live?
I saw it live.
Damn, dude. That's the reason I'm still single.
It was incredible.
Yeah, that was That was I always stay away from the Ritz crackers. Or hold on, it's the saltine crackers. Anyway, whatever, you get me. But so many great comedians had that culture. I mean, for me, just everything was vibrant and lively. When grunge came along, I was like, what the hell is this depressing shit?
Yeah.
I am a Nirvana's fan now. I like Nirvana. But at the time, when grunge came out, you were just like, wow, we went from bright colors and rainbows and sunlight to some really dark shit.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the path we were on. Some people say that.
Alice in Chains down in a hole. I mean, we went deep.
Yeah, we went really dark. Like we were just right off the deep end. And I was a Metallica fan, so I was already pretty dark. But I was just like, what the hell is this crap? And you know, it's but it was a eclectic time. It was a great time. Just so many wonderful things politically, so many crazy things going on. I think in the 80s, didn't we have the fall of the Berlin Wall in 89?
Yeah, absolutely.
The mind's starting to go crazy.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was an incredible decade. And when you talk about the movies, for example, one of the reasons that people say, well, why 80s movies? What's what is it about 80s movies that they keep coming back? And so even now, I have friends who have kids that are 20 years old, 22 years old, and some of their favorite movies are from the 80s. And so you think about why is that? And I think part of it was, if you go back to the 80s and you look at the types of movies that were being made, today, if you make a movie and you get halfway through the movie and you realize, my movie's not good, or the acting, the dialogue, whatever it is, something's not good. I have a big enough budget. I'll just throw a couple $1 million at some CGI, and then everybody will say, special effects. Everybody will say, man, you got to go see this movie in the theater. How many times have you heard that? You got to go see this movie. In the 80s, they didn't have that option. So if you wrote a if your movie was bad from a character development perspective, a dialogue perspective, a plot, people weren't going to go. And the markets that are open today for a bad movie to make money anyway weren't there. So you spent 6 months at the box office in the US. I mean, this is real, 4 to 6 months. And then 5 months later, you're on HBO. And then 4 months later, you're in the video store. And that was pretty much it. That was all the market there was. And now if your movie doesn't make money in the US, you send it overseas and you can make money off of it there. And it's hard not to make your money back now. Then they didn't have a choice. They couldn't throw special effects at it. So
maybe they had to work harder to make really good movies, because now some of the stuff that they make nowadays, you're just like, what the hell? I mean, did you know that was going to go directly to video and you just phoned it in or something? It's just one of those things where you're just like what the hell went on? Like, did you know this was going to VCR? But there's not VCRs anymore.
Well, there are. You can get them on eBay. But yeah, you can. But the thing is, with these, I
actually own a VCR. I just realized. I thought I actually have a VCR because I actually have tapes. My mom gave me some tapes of my childhood. She had the old 8mm reels put on the 60mm 8, whatever, put on the video. So one of these days, I guess I gotta go ahead and put on a CD. Or wait, those are gone too.
Yeah, but everything, listen, I have a record player again, so vinyl's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the 80s too is like you caught the album era and the CD era, and like me, you probably went into the CD record store and you would spend like 4 fucking hours, like just wandering the different albums, looking through them, going, reading the liner notes, trying to figure out if you wanted to plunk down your $12 for that LP.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
then I would go next door to the arcade and spend a bunch of quarters playing Dragon's Lair or Galaga or something. I mean, that's another thing that I miss.
Galaga and all the different things. I mean, in the early 80s, we had the arcade shops, and you went there, the pile full of quarters, and they had the big arcade machines, and that was how you played video games. And then eventually Commodore 64s and Apple computers came out, and you had little tape memory, the cassette tape memory. I love that. There's a meme I always see on Facebook and social media where it shows a cassette and it shows a pencil and says, if you know what to do with this, you probably grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
You'd be like, people are, hey, what are you doing? I'm rewinding my Van Halen tape, man. Trying to get back to the beginning. What's going on? My Walkman batteries are dead, man. I just gotta rewind this thing. The problem was they'd make the cassettes, and they have the A side and the B side. And the B side sometimes would be short, especially if it was like Van Halen or Rolling Stones. So there'd be like 50 miles of reel you had to do, and you didn't want to burn through your battery, so you just hand wind it with a pencil or a big pen. Those are high-tech days. These kids have no idea what they're missing. Suffrage.
But everything that you're talking about is what made the 80s great, and why.
That built character, man. That built character.
Yeah. Yeah.
And rewind your own shit.
You talked about the whole idea of this evolution across the entire decade, and all the things that I think there was just an explosion of stuff, I think is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that we had that. There was this explosion of stuff, and there was something for everyone. I think that's the big thing. You had, hip hop came into fashion, but there was still punk rock. You still had the Sex Pistols. You still had, Johnny Rotten. You still had the edgy punk. You had the hip hop coming in. You had, if people wanted to listen to Debbie Gibson and Tiffany, they could listen to Debbie Gibson and Tiffany. You still had heavy metal.
I remember how huge they were, man. It was
You had the Cure. You had the Smiths. You had it all. And Debbie Gibson. No, wait, it was Tiffany that said, "I think we're alone now." I think
they were both like just freaking too huge for their time. I think they really set the stage for the Mariah Carey, Paola. I think that's when the decade really started dying. I remember I was a huge, and you can correct me because you maybe studied the 80s more than I did. But for me, where the 80s really started to die was when the Paola started to die, when the A&R men started showing up in bands studios going, no, we need more synthesizers, and we gotta control this, and we gotta start getting getting the dailies on what you guys are doing so we can listen to them and then shape the music. There's more of a corporate shaping. I remember I was a huge Kansas fan, and I was really excited to get their new album, and it was going to be freaking huge. And the CEO and president of MCI decided he wanted to bang Mariah Carey. And so he got in with her, and then he shit-canned every album that was coming out on the MCI label. Just didn't market it, just threw it in the drink, really, when it came down to it. They issued the albums and said, have fun with that. And they put all their Paola and money into Mariah Carey. And to me, and then Paola's, really started taking off. Lars talks about it from Metallica and other people. And I think that's what really started killing the 80s. It went from that bright, spontaneous creative thing like you're talking about to where everyone was like, how do we make some money off of this? The whole corporate thing.
Yeah.
My take on it. I don't know.
No, it's a good take. I mean, and again, I think that's why it's just things keep coming back there to the 80s because of there was this individual freedom, this creativity that I'm not sure that we're ever going to see it again. And it's the reason that when you think about the great characters in movie history, so many of them come from the 80s, and they've stuck with us. And so that's, there's just not a decade like it, in my opinion.
Video games, of course, really started hitting their stride. The PlayStation 3, I think, came out in the 80s, didn't it?
No, I think it was. We had definitely had PlayStation.
Yeah, it was trying to come out. You had Nintendo, you had Atari. Gaming was starting to come out, but I think that's the reason things went so dark with grunge and everything. I think the money and the corporate powers that wanted to be, like one of my favorite bands, Rush, talks about this. Like in 1986, I think it was, the A&R guys started showing up in the studio going, hey, I'm the rep from the label, and we're going to help you guys sell albums here by manufacturing this music a little bit better than what you guys are doing. They're like, hey, we're just artists. We want to make beautiful music. And they're like, no, we're going to meddle with it a bit. And you need more synthesizers. You need more, whatever. And I think that's where the beauty of the 80s started to really come down. That's why we got the 90s. That and a bunch of millennials got born. So I kid my millennial folks, you bastards. And then we had Gen Y and Gen X and now we know abortion's legal. I'm just kidding. Seriously. Anyway, so what else can we learn from your book?
Yeah, so I think what I kind of want, a lot of times people ask me the question, how did you come up with this idea of tying 80s movies to the workplace? Like, what would prompt this? And so I think it's a good lesson because, like a lot of people, I was in a job that just really wasn't working for me. And I kind of came home one day and I was, having a self-pity party of one, I guess you would say. Nobody else was feeling
Fridays around here with a bottle of vodka. We call that Fridays around here with a bottle of vodka.
Yeah, it was a self-pity party of one. No one else is going to feel sorry for you. And I was home on a Saturday afternoon and I was watching The Breakfast Club, which is one of my favorite movies of all time.
That's a great movie.
I got the "Don't You Forget About Me" up there on the back, and also the if he gets up, we'll all get up. It'll be anarchy, which is one of my favorite quotes. And so I was watching The Breakfast Club, and at one point when Principal Vernon comes in and the door is shut because Bender's taking the screws out of the door so he can't see into the library. And he says, who took the screws out of the door? And Bender says, screws fall out all the time. The world's an imperfect place.
That's a great movie.
And it was I kind of like sat up on my couch and it just resonated. Though that line, screws fall out all the time, the world's an imperfect place, it hit me in a weird way. And I realized like your job, your career, your business can be an imperfect place. And from there, I just thought maybe I can take two things that I know well, which is business and 80s, and figure out a way to put them together. And I wrote an article on LinkedIn called "What the Breakfast Club Taught Us About the Workplace."
Oh, wow.
And it just got this, I was shocked at the reaction that I got from it. People were responding, from everywhere saying, hey, this is really cool. This is a great idea. So I wrote another one, Ferris, Bueller and work-life balance. And then I started thinking, maybe I have something here. And I started to look back at the movies and I realized if you just look at them in a different light, if you break them down a little bit, you can find these really cool lessons in them. And it's usually what the characters said. So E.T., for example, at the end of E.T., and by the way, I will tell you that I don't typically shed a tear at movies, but I did at two.
You got E.T., yeah.
One was E.T. when he was on the side in the riverbed and he was just real white and looked like he was going to die. And the other one was when Wilson floated away in Castaway, when the volleyball floated away and Tom said, Wilson, I'm sorry. I don't know why, but I cried for a volleyball and an alien, but never everywhere else.
Did Dad leave you as a kid or something?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm
a fine person. I'm just wondering, just trying to figure out the whole volleyball thing.
Yeah, it was weird. I don't know. I was actually at the movie theater with my buddy.
You dated a girl named Volleyball one day, and she just up and left you, or something.
I might have like put that I might have put that away somewhere.
Yeah, you might want to see a shrink about that. So if you start finding you want to buy guns, just see a shrink, talk to somebody.
My buddy was next to me and he said, is it weird that I'm crying for a volleyball? And I said, no, man, everybody in the theater is. So
I wish I'd gotten into that movie more. Some reason I didn't get into that movie. I don't know why. And Tom Hanks is an incredible actor. I love Tom Hanks. I don't know. Maybe I was just busy. I remember watching it in pieces because I don't know. Maybe I was just really disconnected. Maybe I just didn't drink enough. I used to like to really drink and watch movies because then I get more emotionally, captured to them. It's a personal issue.
We'll give it a shot. See what happens.
Don't worry. I'm seeing a psychiatrist.
Don't go watch E.T. So.
But no, what you bring up about the Breakfast Club
is
the Breakfast Club resonated with everybody in the 80s. That's why it was so huge and popular because it was what you're talking about. It was so many different people. It was the loser. It was the reject. It was the weird chick who was kind of wasn't one of them kind of what's that Cure look that I'm thinking of with the dark, everything.
Yeah, the Gotham.
Yeah, and then you had the jock who I think it was Emilio Estevez. You just had this whole crew of people. I think that's the other reason that St. Elmo's Fire was a big hit too, because you had these people from all these different walks of life, all these different characters and different angles on life, and they were still friends because they were joined at the hip from the high school sort of experience. And a lot of great movies from that era and stuff. Just
yeah,
really.
the Breakfast Club. I'm glad you brought that up because the Breakfast Club. You're right. There was the geek, the princess, the jock, the athlete, and the basket case. And so you had these 5 characters, and every high school has them. That's the thing that's why it still resonates today. Every single high school has those 5 characters in it, and they will long after we're gone. And so that's why that movie, I think, resonates so much with people, is because we see ourselves in one of those characters, or we see ourselves in all of those characters. And so it really does resonate, and it will continue to resonate for years. And in fact, I was watching a documentary about Finding John Hughes that a couple kids from Canada, they in 2009, before he passed away, they were on a mission to find John Hughes because they wanted him to understand how much his movies had an impact on them. And they were in their late 20s at the time, so they weren't even old enough in the 80s to appreciate the movies. They had to watch them afterwards. But they were so taken by the movies, particularly The Breakfast Club, that they wanted to let him know. And they filmed this documentary when they went on a mission to go find him. And in the process, they interviewed high school kids. And they asked them, do you know who John Hughes is? And they were like, oh, yeah. Have you ever seen The Breakfast Club? And they're like, my favorite movie ever. Ferris, Bueller, love it. And these kids were 15 years old. But it just resonates. He knew how to talk to teenagers. He knew what it was like to go through that. And I wish I had the power or the money to be able to get The Breakfast Club on Broadway, because I think it's perfect.
I'm really surprised someone has done it, dude. You got $1 billion thing there. Fuck, I mean, yeah,
nobody's done it. It's shocking to me. It's like a perfect.
Dude, you should do it. You gotta go get and Frank, Andrew Lloyd, whoever that guy is that writes all those Broadway musicals. You got to go have him punch one out. And
one room.
And I think Lucas is the big playwright.
What's that?
Everyone loved that movie. I mean, you probably recently saw. I call her AOC. I'm forgetting her name now. I had to Google it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Wasn't it cool how she did the Breakfast Club dance?
Yeah.
Like all the Republicans freaked out, like, oh my God, I'm gonna that in the Congress. You're just like, no, that's really epic.
But she's 29, and so again, 29 years old, not even old enough to be, I don't even know. Let's see, 29 years old, so 10, 20. So she wasn't even born in the 80s, but she's doing that dance, and I guess that's the whole thing. That's again, we go back to this idea of the 80s, and what is it about this decade that people are still looking at it and saying, if I wasn't there, I would have been interested to be part of it. And so I'm gonna take some of those things from the movies and I'm gonna use them. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's like going back to E.T. E.T. taught us a really valuable lesson before it was even popular, and that was about social responsibility. And so you think about E.T. and you go back to that movie, and at the very end, E.T. says to Gertie and Elliot, the last thing he says is, "Be good," right? Be good. These are 2 words that he said before he went back home. Be good. And that was all about being good to each other, being good to the planet, being good to the environment. That's what I took out of it. And you look at these companies today, and part of in the book, I talk about how there's companies like Warby Parker and UB and Tom's who built their business model on social responsibility, on giving back. And they're making a profit and they're giving back. They're doing the 2 things that you would want your business to do. And it's pretty remarkable. So we've come all this way now where people can actually take a day off from work to volunteer, and the companies encourage it. Instead of saying, take a sick day or take your vacation day, they're encouraging their employees to volunteer and get involved.
Definitely. I mean, I think we moved away, we moved away from that corporate man, the IBM man, if you remember that in the 60s. You weren't going to show up at IBM with a gray suit on or a gray hat. Everyone wore hats or gray shoes. You showed up in black, top to bottom, corporate uniform. You don't write outside the lines. You don't think outside the box. You follow the thing. And then we went through the crazy 70s where everything was up and up was down. And there was the real sort of culture clash sort of thing. And then, of course, we went to the 80s where, like you say, it became much more like, hey, it's okay to be an individual, and being an individual is kind of cool. And let's see what it's good to have 31 flavors at the ice cream shop instead of just vanilla. So I remember my brother used to love vanilla ice cream, and God bless him, because vanilla is good, especially to get that white bean or bean vanilla. That's really good.
I can't do it.
I like it every now and then, but it's got to be really expensive, really good ice cream. You know what I mean? It can't just be that cheap crap. But he loved vanilla, and I used to argue with him. I'm like, you got to, have something that tastes like something. Vanilla tastes like vanilla. But hey, everyone did the different flavors. They're different things they like and everything else. And what a beautiful time. But yeah, it was fun to see AOC do that. And to me, that's for the last little while, that's what I was espousing to what I want in Congress. I'd love to have some more personality, some different people, some different aspects instead of a bunch of male suits and middle-aged guys. I'd love to have some flavor, some color, some different people, some different perspectives, so that we become, more representative of what America is. And that's kind of what most of us saw in The Breakfast Club. I mean, back then you had your cliques because you were in high school, and you're like, yeah, I hate the new wave people, fuck those people. And, and Breakfast Club and some of the other movies that came out in that time, they showed that, hey, we can all, hang out together. Like I wasn't a big fan of Girls Just Want to Have Fun. What's her face? Her name is Casey right now. I wasn't a big fan because it was kind of new wave-ish and tinkery, synthesizers, but you kind of had to do, I kind of liked the song. It had a great catch to it, Girls Just Wanna.
Oh, Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, Cyndi Lauper. And it's a fun song. And it kind of espouses, it's all some fun. It's all just lighten up a little bit here and have some fun. And so what a great time. Anything else you want to share with us about the book?
Yeah, so, there's some serious lessons in there, but then there's some fun ones as well. This guy that I have on my shirt right here, if you can kind of see, that's, Spicoli, right? So, I mean, one of the greatest characters of all time. I mean, hands down, I don't care what anybody says, in every decade in the history of movies, it is one of the greatest characters of all time.
You know what's funny is I just saw him yesterday on, I don't know what I was doing. I was searching through some site on music or something, and I saw the picture of Spicoli in the video cover they have for him. And I was like, I think what it was is I was on Netflix, and I was like, yeah, let's find some stuff to watch. And that came up, and I was like, man, if I ever meet him, I'm going to give him shit and call him Spicoli. Does he care? Because he's such a serious guy. I'll probably get punched in the face.
He's very serious. And it's funny that this was the character that really made him.
The character that propelled him.
And so I talked about like the serious lessons in the book for business. The ideas of Del Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles teaching us about how every company needs a great salesperson. A very important lesson. But Spicoli taught us something as well, which is kind of a fun one, and that is that make sure that when you order lunch in the office, to order enough for everybody. Because if you don't, he gets the pizza and he says, there's nothing wrong with a little feast on our time. And of course, Mr. Hand says, you're right, Mr. Spicoli, and gets everybody to come up to have, a piece of pizza. And so there's some funny lessons in there as well about, just having some fun with some of these movies and the things that they may have taught us as well. So.
Yeah, it's quite the journey looking back. To me, some of the music was some of the best in the 80s. Some of the things in the movies, of course, and they're still retreading the movies from the 80s now in Hollywood. I mean, it's just a never-ending cycle of all the great movies. It's amazing to me how many Star Wars they keep coming up with. I'm just like, seriously, another Star Wars movie? As long as I don't see the Death Star in them, I'm kind of okay with another Star Wars movie, because I'm tired of seeing the Death Star. To my Star Wars fans, I'm sorry, man. Just, we need a new plot. That's all I'm saying. But then again, you go back to a lot of the movies that were made in the 80s that came out of what's his face from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s Japan, Akira Kurosawa. And how that affected them and everything else. So maybe you should do a book on how the previous culture affected the 80s. Or I don't know if you talked about that in your book, but what kind of got us the 80s? I don't know. That might be.
I haven't, but that would be an interesting one for sure. I think when you talked about the idea of like this kind of explosion of things that were happening in the 80s. And why these, you mentioned Star Wars, for example, right? And so they're remaking all of these movies now. And I I really don't like it. Like, I would rather they just re-release the original. First of all, it would cost less money to re-release the original. So I never understood why they don't do that. And then, you know, I'm at the point where I'm like, please do not remake any more Patrick Swayze movies. Just let his movies speak for him, because he did some phenomenal movies in the 80s. And they keep remaking them, and the remakes are terrible.
They're always terrible. There's stuff you don't touch. You don't freaking cover Stairway to Heaven. You just don't.
Yeah.
You just leave it alone. There's things that should be law, like Whiter Shade of Pale. You can get away with that because everyone's done it, and you know you just got to do it because everybody else the fuck has. It's kind of like Pamela Anderson. But
don't remake Roadhouse.
No, I love Pamela Anderson. She was my 80s probably early love. Roadhouse, yeah, you can't don't make Roadhouse. And what's funny,
they're doing it. They're doing it with Ronda Rousey.
I think I remember hearing that. And the problem was the funny thing is who's the cowboy in that? He's the cowboy. Sam Elliott. What's funny about Sam Elliott is he's the same goddamn age in that movie that he is today.
Yeah.
He looks like the same grizzled old motherfucker that he is today. Yeah. He hasn't aged a year, and he was old then. But I remember I was real upset when he got stabbed and died. That was real. I think I cried at that moment because he's a badass. He was my John Wayne dude.
Yeah.
He was my John Wayne. He always has been. In some of the great movies he's always been in. You know, he was never going to get caught on a movie like Brokeback Mountain. Let's put it that way. You know, he's a real Marlboro man's man. In fact, I was surprised he wasn't like the Marlboro man all the time. But what was the other great movie that he was in with the two brothers, the Ethan brothers, that they did where it was that classic movie with Bridges and they were bowling and stuff, and he was in the movie, and I forget what it is. Somebody will fill it in, I'm sure. So let's wrap the show up, Chris. Anything more you want to plug? Anything more you want to tell us about the book and what you got going on?
Yeah, sure. So I think the important thing with the stuff that I've been working on with the 80s and the workplace is, you know, I do a lot of speaking at events and conferences, and I talk about this idea of 80s movies and what they teach us about the workplace. And I think the important thing is that when you work in a business, you know, you have people come in consistently teaching you about different things with corporate training. You go to a conference or an event and you hear a lot of the same things from, you know, business and about leadership and management. And some of it's very good. Some of it is difficult to retain. And I think what I do with my content, what I think is good is when you teach about inclusion and you use Chunk and Sloth to teach someone about inclusion, the hope is that they retain it and they take it back to the workplace instead of, you know, talking about inclusion and hearing, you know, the same kind of ideas in the same situations, to be able to say, I'm going to teach you about inclusion and I'm going to use Chunk and Sloth to do it. I'm going to teach you how there really are no stupid questions in the workplace, and I'm going to take the kids from Stand By Me, and I'm going to show you and teach you how they taught us that really there are no stupid questions, and that the simplest questions sometimes actually create the biggest brainstorms in the office. When the kids from Stand By Me said, we're sitting around a campfire and you know, had the conversation about if Mickey's a mouse and Donald's a duck and Pluto's a dog, what's Goofy? And of course, you know, well, Goofy's a dog. And he says, yeah, but he drives a car and wears a hat. Yeah, and of course he says, well, yeah, what the hell is Goofy? And that idea that it started this brainstorm from this, what should have been like kind of a stupid question, actually created this big conversation about what Goofy was. And so I think that's what I really enjoy about the book. And what I hear from people is the lessons that are in there for the workplace and for business and even for life are, you can retain them because you're thinking about these characters and then you're applying those characters to the lesson. And I think that's pretty. I think it's pretty unique, and it's a lot of fun for me. I'll tell you that. So,
it's pretty interesting how the circular nature of movies and music reflect life and culture, and then we get our culture back from it, and it feeds itself as it would.
And the second book, I'm writing the second book, and the first 3 chapters, just to give you an idea. Actually, the first 4. So the first 3 chapters in the second book, I have Caddyshack, The Princess Bride, and The Outsiders.
Oh yeah.
Finish those 3.
Did you cover The Sandlot? That was pretty epic book.
But it's epic. I love it. I mean, I love the movie, but it's the 90s. I may have to figure out a way to sneak it into one of my books because I love the movie.
My book for the 90s would be how you guys missed all the greatest music and videos ever from the 80s and you bastardized humanity. That would be, I don't know. I'm just kidding, my millennials. No, it's just, it went really dark with grunge. I remember seeing grunge come out, and I was like, what the fuck is going on in Seattle? Heroin.
That was the end of Warrant and Winger and all those guys. That was
like all the. I remember this. One of my models from my model agency came up, and she saw my 4,000 CD collection. She goes, "You're a butt rocker." I was like, "What's a butt rocker? That sounds gay." There's nothing wrong with that, but she goes, "That's all that long hair," and I'm like, "Get out of my studio." But she still was hot, so I still took her out. But after, she was not allowed in the CD room ever again. No, it was great music. What's funny is my talent agency. We had an acting and modeling talent agency years ago, and Emilio Estevez's uncle, Joe Estevez, was with our agency. He was with a lot of agencies, and he used to call me, and he sounds just like Martin Sheen. In fact, he did the voiceover for a lot of Martin Sheen stuff, and so it was funny to learn the whole story of the Estevez family, which is their real name, not Sheen.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got to know a little bit about the family from that angle. So yeah, it was kind of cool because when you watch Breakfast Club, you're like, God, Emilio's a fucking dick. But most jocks were back then. I can see that because I wasn't one. I was the nerd. I was the weak nerd. I was like, I have to run a third lap. This is, I was like this thin little thing. Anyway, moving on. So give us the plugs in the book, where we can get it, and anything you're doing with it.
Yeah. So I appreciate the time. The first book, What 80s Pop Culture Teaches Us About Today's Workplace, and it's mixtape #1, is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle ebook. About halfway through the second book right now, and that'll have more distribution. Will have a publisher for that one, so I won't be self-publishing anymore, which is going to be great for me. Although I do like the name of my publishing company, which is Farmer Ted Publishing, and if you know that one from 16 Candles, so that's the name of my little publishing company that I created, Farmer Ted Publishing. So you can find me at chrisclews.com. I'm available to speak at events and conferences at any time. I have quite a few of them coming up in the next few months as well. So my content fits any theme, any industry, and I love getting on stage and talking about this stuff. 80s Pop Culture on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn are Chris Clews. And if I could mention one more thing that we talked about at the beginning of the show. So unfortunately, as life would have it, a few days ago, I lost a friend of mine from college. He has a 14-year-old daughter. He died in a car accident. It's just like that, he's gone. And so, people set up GoFundMes and different things to help. If you went to his Facebook page, you would see that she was his heart and soul. So what I've done is I've taken my book here, What 80s Pop Culture Teaches About Today's Workplace, and all the royalties through March 3rd are going to his daughter. So if you're thinking about purchasing the book or the ebook, if you're interested in the content, you think it's cool, or if you just want to support a 14-year-old girl who just lost her father, that's the way to do it. So I started on February 19th, and we're doing pretty well, and we'll continue through March 3rd. All 100% of the royalties from ebook and paperback are going to go to his daughter.
Well, there you have it. Be blessed. I hope that will work for her and you guys. Certainly is a good thing. So anyway, we appreciate you guys coming by the show today. Be sure to check out Chris's book on amzn.to or any of the different Amazon booksellers out there in the marketplace. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to give us a like, subscribe to us on youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification button. Also go to twitch.tv/Chris Voss. You can see the different gaming interviews we're doing there with game developers as well. You can, of course, follow Chris Voss, thechrisvossshow.com. You can go to the Chris Voss Podcast Network.com. I've got too many .coms. And you can go to, of course, see the show also on bookauthorpodcast.com. So, you can go check it all out from there, and be sure to further show your friends, neighbors, relatives, dogs, cats, all that sort of good stuff. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you next time.